All right. So hopefully we're all here and we're all safe today. Happy COVID experience to everybody who's joining us today for this what I think is going to be rather a fun webinar. Today we're lucky to have Joe Pusz. No, do it again. Tell me again.
Puzz.
Let's get it.
Puzz.
Puzz.
Rhymes with buzz, but with a P.
You see, the problem is I'm learning Polish right now, and so I'm trying to read it as Polish. So that's my error. So Joe has joined us. Joe's the founder of the PMO Squad, which is I don't know how many people have come across PMO Squad, but they're a US-based project management consulting firm. But he also does a whole bunch of online blogging and online podcasts and so forth. Hosts a PMO project management office hours radio show, loads of podcasts, and what's really kind of cool from that is that Joe has the chance to talk to lots of really interesting, really experienced people. A bit like doing this myself. And he also has direct frontline experience with the PMO consulting. So he has a lot of experience, but it's more than just the experience of project management and program and portfolio management. It's about, one of the reasons I'm excited to have Joe here is because there's a heart to the work that he does. So Joe is also a co-founder of, and I've written this down so I get it right, the Veterans Project Management Mentoring Alliance, which helps veterans transition from the military into the civil world through project management and so on and so forth. He's also a judge. I mean, this goes on and on. He's also a judge of the 2020 Global PMO Awards and so forth. So, the bottom line is Joe's got a whole load of really good experience, and he's going to share some of that with us today, talking about this purpose-driven PMO. So I'm going to try and break with tradition here. Some of you I know have been on many of our webcasts, and you'll know that I'm always interrupting and interjecting and asking lots of questions, but Joe has an awful lot of ground to cover today. We're going to try and do it in half an hour or so. So I'm going to try and stay reasonably quiet, but I just want to preface it from Transparent Choices point of view. As you know, we're all about project prioritization, and prioritization and defining, doing that project prioritization piece within the portfolio is all about identifying the purpose of the PMO from the point of view of the business. Right? And Joe's going to talk about purpose on a larger stage today. So we're really excited to kind of flesh out that story, give a more three-dimensional picture than perhaps we at Transparent Choice sometimes do. And so with that, Joe, over to you.
Thanks so much. Yes, lots of content here, and all of this we can make available after this. So if we don't get into the deep details of what we cover on each slide, certainly we can continue that conversation after this. So thanks everybody for joining me today, and really look forward to talking to all of you. Really, we're going to try to hit on a few items today. Why PMOs fail. We're going to learn about the power of purpose, the concepts of the purpose-driven PMO, and then how can that purpose-driven PMO help overcome the reasons why PMOs fail. So a pretty straightforward approach for us. This is one of my favorite slides I'd like to share with everybody. And again, this isn't my data. It's data from the pulse of the profession, tracking basically about a decade now. And rather than haggling over the numbers of is 68 or 69% of the project's meeting goals important here in 2019, what essentially we're seeing is it's a flat line. So over the past decade, all of the data that we're receiving from PMI is sharing with us that even though we're increasing the number of certified project managers, we're increasing the investment we're making in dollars in project management systems, we're increasing the amount of training that we're getting across the globe. And with all of that investment in project management and trying to make everything better, the results are still flat. Right? We're not seeing the benefit that one would expect for the amount of investment that we're making. So what we've tried to do with the PMO squad is observe through an interaction with our clients, the time that we're interacting with folks on the radio show, and also from our prior experience running PMOs in the corporate America landscape, is come up with a solution that can help us get better and get outside the box of what we traditionally do with PMOs, and that's the purpose-driven PMO approach. So let's look at why PMOs fail. This is taken out of a presentation that Ori Shibi delivered back in 2013. So some may think, hey, this data is not current, it's a little stale, and I'll give you that, but I think these 12 items that Ori came up with in his work really directionally are correct. There's really not much more that we could look at that would come up with the consistent reasons why PMOs fail. And these are not in a prioritized order of what is the number one reason why, but it's a list of why they fail. And we'll look at, as we move through the presentation, what are the fixes or the way that we can patch a PMO or use the PMO appropriately to overcome these failure reasons. Over on the right, again, a lot of debate about the success and failure of PMOs and how quickly they fail. Bottom line being, PMOs historically have not had good success rates. And part of that, I think, is the definition of the PMOs. But really, these 12 reasons, when you take them into account, lead to over 1, 2, 3 years. PMOs just don't survive. And it's our job as leaders within the industry to come up with solutions that are going to help us overcome these. So what is the purpose-driven PMO, right? If we think PMO, there's no common definition across the globe of what PMO actually is. Some organizations, it's project management office. Some it's portfolio management office. Some it's program management office. So without a consistent definition, how do we get a consistent understanding of how to measure its impact? So the change that we've done with the PMO squad is we've rebranded PMO to be purpose, measure, and optimize. So we're not about running projects and people, we're about empowering people to deliver results. And those results and the empowerment of the people are directly tied to the purpose of your PMO. So regardless of your project focus, your program focus, or your portfolio focus, the focus can be on purpose, right? Why does the PMO exist? Then measure, are we achieving that why? And based on those measurements, optimize to ensure we're achieving the why, the purpose. Right, so it is a change up from the traditional. And if we think about some stories we've had, we've been in organizations where a leader is new to an organization and he wants to rebrand the PMO from a project management office into a portfolio management office. But all of the teammates that were on that PMO before the new leader came on board were project-focused resources. They weren't portfolio-focused resources. So just the understanding of a leader's view of PMO can negatively impact the ability of that PMO to deliver. And without a common definition out there, this is why PMOs, it's a contributing factor to why PMOs fail. So we've tried to make it be consistent. PMO in our lexicon, yeah, go ahead.
So I'm sorry, Joe. I said I'd try not to interrupt. Fail. Never mind. So just, I mean, one of the things that I'm always interested in when you think about the purpose of the PMO, actually stepping back a second and asking, what's the purpose of doing projects in the first place? And, and that's actually about achieving the business goals. And so I think what I'm hearing from you is that, so the goal of delivering projects is to help the organization achieve some business goals, right? And they're goals, so that means we've got to change something and the way to achieve them. And so the way that you change something is by doing projects. Right? That's what projects are. So if I understand correctly, the core premise here is that when you're thinking about running and managing a PMO, is stepping back and figuring out what, in that context of helping the organization deliver more consistent value more often, more effectively, what's the purpose of the PMO? Have I got that right?
That's correct. And what we found, as to your point, is some organizations want the PMO to be a governance function, not an execution function. So they want to ensure, they're going to audit, they're going to ensure that they're following process, and they're not as concerned with outcome. Of course, the business wants outcome, but that's not what the PMO has been chartered to do. Other organizations, the PMO is all about execution. So you have two different organizations with two different charters for their PMO. How would they be evaluated? Well, if we're thinking strictly execution, the governance function would be a failure. But if we define their purpose to be just a governance organization, then they're actually achieving their purpose. So that's where we want to align the purpose to the organizational's understanding of why that PMO will exist.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
So why purpose, right? If we think about this, purpose is so important in our personal lives, whether it's religion or faith, our family, other items. Purpose actually drives action and our decision making. This picture I have on here is from runners running a marathon, the Marine Corps Marathon in Washington, D.C. And I've run 5 marathons. But when I'm not training for a marathon, I'm a 235-pound, 50-plus-year-old guy that's not in great shape. But when I run my marathons, I run them for a charity. In this case, Team Red, White, and Blue, which supports veterans. And when I have a purpose that I'm going to do something to support a cause bigger than me, I'm able to go run marathons. And on a daily basis, I don't get up and go run 26 miles. I don't have that capability within me. But when my mindset shifts to try to achieve a broader purpose greater than my individual role in this world, I'm able to accomplish items that I normally wouldn't be able to do. And we see that all day long in our personal lives. What we're trying to do with Purpose Driven PMO is bring that mindset into the corporation and get everybody aligned with the broader reason, the broader purpose that we're trying to achieve, to ensure that we can do things greater than what we thought was possible, like running a marathon, except we're going to do that in corporate America, or in any organization across the world, of course, where people are tuning in from. And that's this concept of big P versus little p. Purpose, right? The purpose of this webinar is to share with all of you our purpose-driven PMO approach. But the big P purpose of me doing this webinar is to empower people to deliver results, right? That is the purpose of the PMO squad. We've branded ourselves and taken on that approach. So you can have two purposes. The purpose of a project may be to implement a CRM system that's going to drive sales and relationship management better within an organization. But the big P of that could be that the PMO's purpose is to increase revenue for the organization. So you can have little p and big P, but understand the purpose-driven approach is we have to define the big P purpose. We know the reason projects exist. They're going to execute things. But the big P purpose is, what is the value, as Stuart mentioned, what is the value to the organization we're trying to achieve, and move our mindset from little p purpose to the broader big P purpose. Right?
And in your experience, Joe, when you go into an organization, how many of them actually have a statement around big P? How many of them know what their big P is?
Yeah, less than 5%. It's very few organizations. They're all focused on small p. And that's where
that's what I thought.
Yeah, I mean, there's a story of a consulting firm that went into an organization that manufactured valves for hearts, and the manufacturing company had become stale and stagnant, much like our graph on the first slide we presented. They had no growth, and they hired a consulting firm to come in and ask them How can we improve our capabilities to get back on an upward slope? After a few months worth of analysis, the consulting firm came back to the executives and said, I want you to put up a poster at the door where your employees walk in. And the executives were like, are you kidding me? We've just paid you all this money for you to tell us we need to put up a poster? They said, yes, the poster needs to be a picture of your patients who've received your valves and didn't die. So every employee, when they come to work, will understand the purpose of that company isn't to work on a manufacturing line and receive a paycheck. It's actually to save lives of people who need this heart valve to be, to not die. And within 3 months of putting that poster up, they were back on the upward slope of growth of as a company, because now their employees were empowered to go achieve these results that were going to help people save lives. And that's the difference between little p and big P.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you.
So again, we won't stay on this slide too much, but the key here is before we start looking at how we operate and what we're going to do, which is what most PMOs have done, we're going to focus on why we exist, purpose. How do we do that? A lot of information on this slide, so we're not going to hit all of it. But bottom right corner, these were 7 of the items from the 12 reasons why PMOs fail. And by defining a purpose, aligning the PMO to the organization's mission, vision, strategy, and objectives, by working with the executives, we can overcome more than 50% of the reasons that Ori defined why PMOs fail. And this is important to understand because we often, when we build PMOs, start with how are we going to manage our portfolio? What are the elements we're going to use to grade and prioritize within our portfolio? But if you haven't determined why you exist, how do you know if your scoring methods are correct within your portfolio and prioritization methods? And that's why we start with why. That's why we start with purpose.
And I mean, you've just articulated very clearly why most prioritization methods just don't work. And there's some good research on that, and it's because there's no good alignment on the why. So yeah, all over this. Fully agree.
Fantastic. I love this stuff, man. I get so excited when I do this. The other part to this, if we ask leaders across the world, what's your number one asset? The overriding answer to that is always our people. And then what do we do to our people? We hamstring them with process, right? You're not allowed to do X because the process says you can't. I mean, it's crazy. What we do in the Purpose Driven PMO is we actually unleash the power of our people. We turn them loose and say the objective is implement the CRM system so that we can get 20% revenue growth, and go do it. If that was a salesperson and we said, go get 20% revenue growth, the executives want to know the result. Did we increase revenue? They don't ask, did you submit your weekly status report to show me how many calls you made last week? Did you update your CRM system to make sure the notes are entered properly? They want to know, did you close the $1 million deal with our prospect? And what we focus too often in the project space are the project-based results as opposed to the purpose-driven results. So we want to empower our people to go get the job done, just like we've empowered sales staff. Just like we've empowered manufacturing teams, we want to do the same for our project teams. Next up is measure, right? How do we know if we're being successful if we don't measure? And measure has to be done in the sense of value to the organization, not as project performance, right? We've all seen those dashboards of the 15 projects on the left. Across the right side is their scope, their budget, and their timeline. They're red, yellow, green, and an executive picks it up and says, I have no idea in the world what I'm looking at. Are we going to get 20% revenue growth this year or not? And if I'm looking at this stoplight chart, how in the world does it tell me if I'm going to hit 20% revenue growth? We should be providing charts to executives that actually show 20% revenue growth and a slope to be able to achieve it. Bottom right here, again, these are 3 more reasons why PMOs fail, that if we put in proper measurement systems, we're going to be able to help overcome the top reasons why PMOs fail. How many of us in running a PMO actually manage our staff and measure our staff with statistics like we do and provide value to our executive team of how the PMO is performing, right? We're committed to our people because they're people, but are we committed to success of the organization and the value of the PMO less than we are to our people? If we don't have a team member who's achieving what they need to help the organization achieve their results, are we letting them go? Are we training them properly? Are we ensuring they have the right skill sets? If we think about professional sports teams, right? Across the globe, soccer is such a big sport, or football, however it's branded locally for you. If you're trying to win the championship and you have a team that has a deficiency at goalie, do you keep the same goalie, or do you try to get a goalie who's going to be a better defender for your goal? Well, of course you're going to pick a better goalie, but we don't do that in organizations. That long-time resource maybe who hasn't been able to achieve his or her job, we keep them around because of this relationship we've built with them at the detriment of our PMO being able to successfully deliver. And this is one of the challenges that we have with the purpose-driven PMO versus traditional PMOs is we actually want to optimize based on our measurements, right? Whereas in many PMOs, the status quo of resources allows us to fail in 1, 2, or 3 years because we don't have the right people to get the job done. You know, another thing that we have to optimize towards is purpose, right? If we think a race car here, as you can see, it goes into the pit row to get new tires, to get its engine tuned, to get more gas, to adjust the brakes, to adjust alignment, because they're trying to win the race. All of those adjustments are to try to help the car win the race. What are our adjustments in the PMO about? Are they about trying to achieve our purpose, or are they about trying to get a project on track? We have this tremendous focus on projects, and we have a complete lack of focus on delivery of value to the organization. And when we define our purpose, measure how well we're doing to achieve that purpose, and then make decisions to optimize, we're actually operating like a race car team or operating like a professional soccer or football team. We're actually trying to achieve the purpose. The last 2 items over here on the bottom right, you know, these are the final 2 of the 12 that we listed. The key for all of this is if we're not making decisions that are impactful to achieve our why or our purpose, are we adding value back to the organization? Are we making the right decisions within our portfolio to prioritize work properly so that it's providing the purpose achievement for the organization? Or are we there just reporting dashboards of stoplights that executives look at and get confused and they don't even know what the value is? So if we think, summarizing all of this, right? Purpose-driven PMO, outside the box thinking from traditional PMO. We're not a project, we're not a portfolio, we're not a program management office. We're purpose, measure, optimize. Start with the why we exist, the big P, prior to determining how to achieve it and what we're going to do. Measure how well we're actually performing against that purpose, and then optimize our process, our tools, our people to ensure that we've empowered our team to deliver the results of achieving a purpose-driven PMO. I got it all done in 30 minutes or less.
You're my hero. You're my hero. It's not as easy as that, though, Joe, because there are some follow-up questions. So, folks, if you wiggle your mouse down at the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A box. Feel free to dive on there and ask questions. We'll have a quick game of Stump the Chump now, I guess. So the first question I have, it comes from what you were just saying right there, Joe, which was about really making the PMO be about the purpose. But earlier on, you said that a lot of the people here are from a project background. So who should be in the PMO? What kind of people should you have there asking these questions and figuring out the answers?
What we found is that the PMO being led by a business leader ends up being more successful than being led by the project manager who got promoted into PMO leader. And the reason that we've discovered for that is the senior project manager or the PM who's had success that then gets promoted never gets trained by the organization of how to actually run a function. So they haven't received training on how to do budgeting, how to do team leading, how to do management, how to do visioning, all of the elements that are required for any other department in the company to exist. So we're taking people who are focused on execution of a project and asking them to go lead a department and don't provide them the training to do that. So we'd rather see people who are running PMOs who actually are business leaders and focused on the results of the output and use a team of project managers, project coordinators, portfolio managers to achieve the results.
Yeah, that's one of the questions when we do these webinars. I've asked that question a few times, and you know what? I think everybody has given the same answer that you have. So there's a lesson there somewhere, I think. So thank you for that. One really quick question from one of the listeners is, Joe, are you willing to share the slides? I know we're gonna circulate the video afterwards, the recording. But are you happy to circulate the slides as well?
Yeah, I think absolutely. If they want to reach out to me on any of the contact info here, or I could certainly hand them over to you, Stuart. I think you guys have them. You're more than welcome to share those as well.
Super, excellent, very good. Okay, Rico Asta from Easy Projects, he's on here. Good to see you, Rico. And he asks, what kind of tools support the Purpose, Measure, Optimize model? So what kind of tools do you need to make that work? Of course, you need transparent choice project prioritization. We wouldn't be here otherwise.
That's right.
But no, take that aside. That's a little joke, folks. So what would you recommend to Rico and other people listening?
Yeah, I think the tools, again, depend on the purpose of your organization. Certainly, most organizations, and I'm not aligned to any tool out there, right? I'm tool and vendor agnostic because to me, the tool has to fit your purpose. So whether you have an enterprise class PPM tool, whether you use multiple tools, whether you use spreadsheets, I don't think there's a generic answer to that, but you have to have something that's going to help you measure. And generally speaking, the way you can measure is by capturing data in a fast, automated, consistent fashion. So some sort of tool, whether it's transparent choice or others, to be able to capture your data, organize that data into reports that can be evaluated and be able to share that openly with your leadership team. So hard to give an answer to, every company is not generic, right? Every company is unique. So based on the purpose or the uniqueness of your company can help dictate what type of tools you should be using. At the same time, we're believers in using traditional tools like scope statements and project charters. And, if you're agile versus waterfall, the appropriate tools that would go along with the methodology you've chosen to deliver projects. So it's a really hard question to answer because of the uniqueness of each company that's out there.
Great. Thank you for that. We've actually just got a follow-on question from that one. So if we've got time, we'll come to that in a second. But first of all, there's an interesting question here from Kashif, who asks, how do you deal with change of executive sponsor and the resultant difference in the purpose of the PMO? So, leadership changes, the purpose changes, what do you do?
That's a great question. I didn't really touch into that because we were moving quickly, but our thought is the purpose-driven PMO is constantly evolving. And that's another reason why PMOs fail is you build it and it stays the same over time. When we align to mission, vision, strategy, and objectives of the company, as the company changes the mission, vision, strategy, and objective, the PMO has to change with it. So a new leader coming in will probably create a new strategy, create a new objective, and we align the purpose back to the new strategy and objective. In the old PMO mindset, your PMO still existed the way it did. It didn't change, it didn't evolve with your leadership changes or with your mission vision changes. So we actually make it easier by having the mindset that we are not a stagnant organization, but we're a constantly shifting and changing organization. There's a bit of overhead, of course, to try to get the measurement system aligned to your new purpose, but by being plugged in to the leadership team and not reporting to, right, we're plugged in as opposed to reporting out to, we are able to constantly evolve and deliver what the organization is looking for. So we're not a stagnant organization, we're an evolving organization.
Excellent, thank you for that one. There are a few more questions. Let's just try and handle one or two more if you got the time, Joe.
Sure.
So one of the questions is from an anonymous attendee. So I can't give you the credit, I'm afraid. But what's your take on business cases supporting the value prior to something becoming a project? And I just have one quick thing to say here, which is that you do obviously need a business case for a project, right? The business case has to stack up, but don't just rely on the business case, because between you, me, and the gatepost, I could write a business case today that would justify pumping more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, or I could write a business case that would justify bringing people, 500 people into an enclosed space right now today while the COVID epidemic pandemic is flying around. Business cases in the hands of a skilled manager can justify anything. So a business case on its own is not enough. I'll kind of throw that out as a starter, and it's why tools like transparent choice work. But the question was actually for you, Joe. So over to you. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think as you stated, right, a business case has its place in the overall hierarchy. One challenge I have to everybody is if you do a business case up front, are you actually measuring your performance against that business case on the back end? And if you're not doing that, then what's the value or what's the purpose of doing it on the front side? So to me, business case is important if it's used consistently across the organization so that you can have a tool to help you prioritize and to align resources and make decisions. But only if on the back end, you're ensuring that you're achieving, I shouldn't say ensuring, but you're measuring to see are we achieving the business case we asked for. And the business case, of course, should align to the purpose. Compliance projects usually have a poor business case to them, but they're mandated by regulations that we must follow. So, in the construction industry, it comes to mind, of course, where the business case sometimes does not match up to what they would expect out of that. But to me, if you don't go end-to-end life cycle of the business case, then why are you doing it up front if you're not measuring the results on the back end?
So staying with measurement, Michael asks, what are a few methods to measure the success of the PMO itself?
Yeah, I think that goes back to the definition of the purpose. When you define your purpose, you're actually defining the measurements that will determine your success. And those usually, again, are to the strategy and objectives of the company. So if your company has 5 strategic objectives for the year, the PMO should be measured on how well did we help influence the success of those 5 strategic objectives.
Absolutely, and it's interesting because I think you can take the exact same approach to projects as to the PMO. I mean, in a way, the PMO is just an initiative like any other initiative, right? It should be ever changing, as Joe mentioned, evolving, which is one of the reasons I think that recovering business leaders make great PMO leaders, because when you're running a business unit, one of the things that you have to do is keep evolving. And one of the things that can be difficult when you come from a project background, projects can be about process and standardization and not necessarily evolving. Right? Evolving in project land is called scope creep, and it's generally something we try and eliminate. So this evolution is really important, and keeping both the projects themselves and the PMO structure and functions aligned around those top-level business goals. But it's the only reason we do projects is to achieve those business goals. So, aligning everything makes perfect sense.
And if we think to our performance reviews, here in the States, the end of the year, am I going to get a merit increase or a raise is often determined based on how did I perform during the year. And when you do that, one of your objectives on there could be successfully delivering projects. And counterintuitive to that is if I mark a project red right before I'm about to go into my performance review, my boss is going to say I'm not doing a good job to be able to deliver my projects. So I'm not going to get a raise this year. So PMs are de-incentivized to actually call out the status of their project. Whereas in a purpose-driven PMO approach, the mindset is red doesn't mean the project's not going well. Red just means we're not achieving purpose currently, and we need to make changes to do that. So we have this whole meritocracy built into the way organizations evaluate project managers, and we're de-incentivizing them to be honest. We need to actually incentivize them to be good stewards of our strategy. And that's, again, the mindset of a purpose-driven PMO, to empower the people to go drive the results and don't evaluate them on these antiquated project management mindsets.
Bingo. I think we've just identified the topic for our next webinar. Fantastic. So on that note, Joe, I want to just thank you for the time. Thank you for sharing. There's a lot of wisdom in there. We only had half an hour or so to cover it, and there was far too much knowledge and wisdom to bring out in just half an hour. So if you do have questions, follow up with us at Transparent Choice, or directly with Joe at the details that you see on the screen right now. And but whatever you do, make sure you put the purpose at the heart of your PMO, at the heart of every project. And as I keep telling my children, put some kind of purpose at the heart of your life as well, and you'll be happier. So thank you again, Joe.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
And thank you everyone for attending. Goodbye.